Welcome to another BloodDK Mythic Plus key. This time it's a 22 Neltharions Lair. It's with a pack group. I will pause the video shortly so I can show my talents and my gear. These are the talents that I chose. BloodDK has basically 2 flex points in the class tree. For this run I chose the single target stun to have something for the maggots in the end or to stun the breakers in the end. The second flex point I put in the improved Icebound Fortitude. I like to have it in this dungeon because there's quite a lot of tank busters and some quite intense trash pulls where it's really nice to have Icebound Fortitude a little bit more often. Another choice could have been AMZ for the worm boss in particular, and maybe for the first boss a little bit, but it's kind of hard to get everything in range. But on Fortified I chose some more personal survivability. On the spec side you can see my general Fortified setup. In really intense dungeons you can change maybe to improved Vampiric Blood instead of the improved Heartstrike. But with the new tier set I really like Umbilicus Aeternus, and since in high Fortified keys your blood shields get eaten really quickly, Bloodshot really doesn't feel that great. On tyrannical keys it's really nice, especially if you have like nice trinkets that do physical damage, for example. And of course your single target damage is much higher percentage of physical damage, so you get much more benefit from Bloodshot in tyrannical keys. But on Fortified keys I really like to have a lot of Vampiric Bloods with Red Thirst, and of course in combination with that the Umbilicus Aeternus in high density Fortified keys is really amazing. And to prevent one-shots in Fortified keys even more, which is like a real danger on BloodDK, I like to put 1 point in the additional health from Bone Shield stacks instead of the 2 points in Heartbreakers. I think 1 point in Heartbreaker is more than enough, and if you have like even more life, then you can prevent some one-shots and feel even more comfortable tanking like really big Fortified pulls. This is my gear at the point of running the dungeon. Unfortunately, I don't have the trinkets that I would want to have. Mark of Darkroot is nice for damage, but I would much prefer to have the Shard of Ragmora actually from this dungeon, but I still didn't manage to get it from farming the dungeon. Which the Shard of Ragmora would actually be really nice for Fortified keys, because it's just shoring up one weakness of BloodDK to limit the number of damage you take from a lot of small hits. Another thing, I like to prioritize Mastery quite a lot in Fortified keys, especially because you can let's have a nice buffer of Blood Shield Mastery for all the auto attacks from the mobs. Like the spell damage doesn't really that matter that you take, you can just heal it, but auto attacks is a big part of the damage that you can take, and with a lot of Mastery you can improve your survivability in high Fortified keys a lot, to my feeling. Crit doesn't really do it that well. Okay, back to the key. Of course, at the beginning we do like a medium-sized pull, like very typical for this key. I try to use all of my abilities to gather all the mobs. Of course, with the Slappy Hands, BloodDK has an easy time to just snag some of the stragglers in. Some groups use Bloodlust at this point, but I think it's a waste. I think on the bots it's much better. You can, in a coordinated group, maybe extend this pull to the big Goliath and then last the trash, but of course I didn't announce this in this group, so I just made a pull that everybody was expecting, which is fairly easy, so you don't need to waste the last tier. Last timing in this dungeon can vary a lot because the trash can take a lot of time and people can randomly die, extending like making the last timers not so great. But in general I would almost always last the first boss, especially in a pack group. BloodDK specifically can grip these lurkers here because this will not only bring them back into the group but also prevent the aggro reset. Of course, when they are raging and we don't have like any raging dispel in the group, I can't grip them, so I just have to run to them and build aggro again. Of course, grip taunt still works, but it of course doesn't grip them. Here I also make another very, very classical pull, just get all the small percentage mobs and just fight these 3 drudges. Not very difficult mobs. The priest will jump down soon after we establish the pull to trigger the boss event. And of course BloodDK here is really nice. Other tanks as well, but especially BloodDK doesn't need any healing on these mobs. They're not really dangerous. So healer can just jump down, trigger the event. We took quite some time to kill these, and the healer was gone. You can see him flying away. And he was wondering like he triggered too early, but of course the boss doesn't aggro by himself, so you can just wait down there. When you jump down here, make sure as a DK or as a shaman to don't activate Water Walk until everybody is down, so they don't get one shot. This boss is nothing special. Of course, as a DK, you mostly start with Slappy Hands here, so it's a very easy way to gather the first wave of skitters. I try to make like a circular movement around the boss room, so I keep the middle clean for the ranges, so they all have a good spot to be in. Of course, on Fortified, this is much easier, and I don't have to move around so much and don't run out of space. Mostly I try to tank the first frontal here and that advance so I don't get knocked. So for the first wave it's very easy for everyone to position themselves. Of course, unfortunately I stood in the green goo, so my AMS was running out before the frontal. With AMS the frontal wouldn't do any damage, but of course I stood wrong, so I took some damage, but it's okay, I have like 1,000,000 lives, so on this Fortified key it wasn't so bad. I did it once like this on a BloodDK key and proc Purgatory from this because AMS ran out and I just got one shot. So be careful of that. Otherwise you can just, of course, run out. But for the first one, I really know, because it's so close together, the knockback and the frontal, I try to just soak it so the melees don't have to worry about the boss moving or anything like that. As a DK, you can, of course, grip all of the skitters in and just place the green portals on top of each other. And with a range comp, like 2 or more ranges, this is really nice to do because they can just cleave from the boss or like focus the skitters and cleave the boss. With the full melee comp, I would just... Yeah, you have to position it a little bit different because you can't really stack these green puddles so much on top of each other because the melees need some space to move around. Yeah, here I just make the circle around at the water's edge. Of course, as a DK, again, you have death advance, so in the crucial moments when you don't want to get knocked somewhere, then you can just press death advance and keep the boss where it is, which is really nice for the melees, so they don't have to move that much. Yeah, this boss doesn't really do much, it's not tyrannical, so the skitters die really quickly, and everybody lives. Here I was checking my route, what I need to pull, what I planned for this group, but and again, with the pack, it's nothing special. I try to pull like what people expect and what is not so dangerous. With a coordinated group, I think you can do like some really nice skips with Priest and don't play any double pelter group, which would make it much easier because when people can just avoid the breaker AoE and you don't pull the pelters, then it's much easier because you don't have so much random group damage, especially on like higher keys. Avoidable damage always much better in higher keys to just avoid and don't play any unavoidable damage. Again, here as a DK, grip works really nicely with these drummers. They don't do anything and you just have to grip them once they start drumming. You just make one grip and they just stand there doing nothing and you can just cleave them off the pack and it's just basically 3% without any struggle. With these breakers, You can see the weak arrow on the side showing the cooldown. When you have to move as a tank, it's not always that easy, and I prioritize not killing my melees when I can survive it. But of course, I don't want to stress the healer, maybe get one shot or whatever. So I try to move out, but very carefully so I don't clip the melee with that. Here again, here's one of the pack with a double pelter. Of course, everybody saved their cooldowns because they knew this was coming. It's still very dangerous, and you could soothe the pack and just jump over the fence at the side, which you can see like on the top left of my screen, and you can just skip these. The same goes for the double pelter pack near the boss. You technically can soothe it for the whole fight, but it's kind of sketchy, and maybe you can just save cooldowns for that pack specifically. Yeah, these packs are... It's just a 22 and people keep dying and almost dying. If you can avoid any kind of double pelter or scorpion pelter thing, then just avoid it and plan your route differently with maybe some more breakers, crocodiles or whatever, just no double pelters. As a DK, these big mobs are basically no danger at all. You can, with the right timing, you can AMS every second frontal, and in combination with Death Advance, you don't even get knocked back, which makes it much easier for the melees again to keep uptime. And if you don't have AMS for the frontal, I guess you just use like a small CD. Technically, in this dungeon, you can skill Rune Tap. I didn't do it for this time. I do it on Tyrannical. And then you can use Rune Tap for these ones really nicely as well. But of course in Tyrannical they don't do nearly as much damage. But even if they hit you, even if you don't really have like big CDs, you can just heal up. DK is really nice for these ones. Unfortunately, I get like a dot like at the very end. I didn't have AMS ready, so I just asked the healer to heal me up, because otherwise I would just tick down. The timing here almost perfectly. Always you have slappy hands for this pull, which is really nice to gather everything up. Again, you can have Death Advance and AMS for the frontal. Just make sure to not, like when you turn around to position the mobs, always like have a nice balance between where's the frontal of the Hulk going and where's the potential avalanche going. With just one melee, of course, this is much easier because they don't run so much danger to overlap their avalanche circles. Here again, this pull, technically you can soothe this pack for the whole boss fight, but I think there's like some moments and like some debuffs or something. I tried it in a lower key where they get pulled even though they are soothed and you don't near them, but when the boss like rushes through them in the intermission, sometimes it pulls them. I don't exactly know how and why. But like on a really high fortified key, maybe that is an option if you figure out like how to make them not pull. For this boss, always make sure when you pull him to press Death Advance so you don't get knocked back when he lands, which is really nice to get some initial aggro. For this boss on Tyrannical, I always skill Rune Tap, so I have like some small CD for every Thunder, but for Fortified, the combination of like AMS, which negates it completely, and like some small CD, he should be easily surviving every one of them. Of course here, these totems, these idols, they always spawn like on the right and the left hand. So you can, when the boss spawns the first one, you have to turn him around like 90 degrees. So the second hand is like basically on top of the first idol. So they spawn right on top of each other and really easy to cleave. Just make sure to not turn him too fast, because then it can be tricky. But yeah, this boss really doesn't do much of anything. But you just make the fight a little bit easier if you make them easy to cleave. Unfortunately, for this phase, the weak hour that you used to use in Legion doesn't work anymore, so you have to play it like by hand. But if everybody pays a little bit of attention, like maybe 2 people like just focus completely on this, then it should be really easy. But they already nerfed the damage that you get in this phase, because at the beginning, like, you get like multiple ticks of damage from each of the totems, so it ramps up really quickly. If you missed the first one, like, you basically just died. In the second intermission, I unfortunately lost the right idol, and I thought it was this one, especially because the warlock just starts wailing at it. But spoiler alert, it wasn't the right one, it was the one next to it. But as you can see, the damage on the group really isn't that bad. It looks dangerous, but yeah, people basically take no damage, and even on Tyrannical, if you have to be really unlucky and kill all 5 of them, I think you can just survive it, but it of course takes a lot of time. Yeah, fortunately this was the right one, and again, for the first hit in these after the intermission, you can always use AMS to make the start really easy as a BloodDK. On Pod Warrior, this dungeon is really nice. Maybe I will make on my Twink Pod Warrior, I will make another run where I can showcase like how much value you get from Spell Reflect in this dungeon, especially on Tyrannical, because like all of the second to last boss, you can Spell Reflect all the big tank hits and provide a lot of damage to the group. On Fortified keys, I basically always try to kill the Crocs or the Nashers, because they are really easy, give nice percent, and yeah, don't do anything. Yeah, they'd really start wailing at these mobs before I could establish any aggro. But the healer was really a nice foresight to give me the angel, so I can start building up aggro without dying. Yeah, these mobs do a bleed, but BloodDK is like really good at bleeds, and I can just tank them quite easily and survive. They don't do much. With a more coordinated group, you could assign like a hunter with misdirect or just any character with a lot of range to pull these Crocs into the next pull. But I don't want to make like really complicated pulls in packs, so people can concentrate on doing damage and surviving. For this pull, I really like the Slappy Hands from DK, so you can just group all of these random casters and whatever mobs like really easily. Make sure as a melee to not stand in the tank, because these big mobs, they do like kind of a frontal end circle around the tank, which does a lot of damage, the ground shatter. In this dungeon, as I said in the beginning, I take the stun, the single target stun, just as an additional way to deal with these little maggots, in case people are concentrated on something else or don't have their stun skilled. Again, you can just grip the lurkers in, which makes it really easy to avoid the aggro reset and just group them up really nicely. Unfortunately, as a group, we run out of stuns at this point, and I see, like, in the corner of my eye, I see this maggot casting Metamorphosis and hoping something would happen, but it didn't. Yeah, this worm is basically the final boss of this dungeon. If you can manage to kill it on this high level of Fortified without anyone dying to it, then just send me the video. I don't believe you. Yeah, this worm almost wiped us. It procced my Purgatory, it killed the healer, it killed everyone except me and the shaman. Yeah, but we managed to overcome this challenge. It is completely avoidable with just another stun, but yeah, that was kind of struggling. At this point, I asked the healer for an angel, but he had it on cooldown, and I didn't really have anything going on for myself, so I tried to pull it like kind of slowly. These mobs, for some reason, like just destroy BloodDK. I don't know much about other tanks, but this pack I basically need external CD and like ideally like all of my CDs just to survive the initial pull, because I think they have a really high auto attack speed, and of course it's a lot of mobs, so I just get wrecked from this pack. But we handled it okay, I would say. Yeah, again, grips here are really nice. This time we have enough stuns for the small maggot, so we managed to do this cleanly. In this dungeon specifically, it's really important as a tank to keep an eye out for the healer's mana, because like most of the trash pulls are really heal intensive. They don't look that challenging like at first, but there's a lot of group damage, especially later with the pelters and the scorpions, and this boss does a lot of group damage as well, so always have a look at the healer's mana. Yeah, this boss, there's some shenanigans you can do as a BloodDK. I didn't test out everything perfectly. I think you can keep grabbing one of these small mobs so it doesn't reach its final position to get eaten by the boss, and if you do that, I think the boss doesn't do the devour when it's not in the final position, because when it is in the final position, you can't actually stun or grab it anymore. On the way there you can, so I think it's coded in a way that you can just keep gripping it, kill the first one, and then after the first one is dead, you can kill the second one, but I didn't figure this out completely. On the BloodDK, there's like a really nice spot that you can use your disadvance to stay in the boss ranges, do some more extra damage, and don't threaten the melees to get one shot when the boss has like a small window of just attacking the closest target. Make sure like to be in this corner where I am, next to the wall, and I think the easiest way to make sure you don't get eaten is like do some steps back until you get just out of reach of the boss, and then step a little bit forward so you get just back into the reach. And at this point, like right before the tongue grabs you, you can just press disadvance, and one disadvance is enough to not get eaten for the whole phase. So you can just provide a little bit more damage. I think it's not really that necessary, but as a BloodDK you anyways do not that much of damage on bosses on single target, so getting this little bit of extra damage is always welcome. On tyrannical keys, I skill in this dungeon, I skill AMZ as well, and have a look like when the healer is struggling and when I can see some ranges like stacking in the back, or like maybe we have a more of melees stacking in the front. I try to keep an eye out for like really struggling overlaps and place just an AMZ for these kind of moments. But for Fortified in this dungeon, I didn't thought it was necessary to skill AMZ and just have a little bit more of personal survivability. But you can argue for having AMZ even on this boss on Fortified, because afterwards I saw it still does a lot of damage, and AMZ would have made the healer life a little bit easier here as well. Here again, I planned my route to not pull this double pelter pack at the side. As I said earlier, try to avoid as many of these as possible. So here I just pull these two guys, which, yeah, just one breaker again, one scorpion, who is the only one doing like group damage, except people not running out of the avalanche, of course. For some reason, these breaker mobs, even though they have the same name as the mobs in the beginning, you can actually stun, interrupt, whatever do to them. I think this group knows this really well, so you can see like the fear from the warlock, the hodge, everything, just to keep this mob from ever doing his avalanche. Unfortunately, of course, at some point he is on the stun DR and CC DR, so like I just have one avalanche going off. But it makes this pull much more manageable if people can focus on doing damage instead of avoiding the avalanche. But I guess one avalanche to avoid is not that hard of a challenge. But yeah, since you can just CC him and delay this avalanche as long as possible, there's no reason not to do it. For these groups, there's not much to say other than try to focus the Trapper, because then you can just limit the amount of unavoidable group damage that's going in. Unfortunately, the Paladin didn't hear this call to focus on the Skull, so he focused on the Dominator instead, and I just lost aggro because I wasn't putting much of aggro into this one. I'm not sure which kind of CCs actually work on the Pelters here in the end, standing with the Scorpions. But you can make an argument for just CCing maybe both of the Pelters and then lasting both of the Scorpions or something like that. If you do a little bit of different last timings, like we would just lasted the Worm, so we didn't have it like at this point. And you can see like even when after focusing the Pelter, the group still struggles a lot. So maybe you can change the route a little bit to have lust for maybe double Scorpion, something like that. I have to try it out a little bit, but again, on this kind of pack group, I try to make the pulls as closely to like the average, what people are expecting as possible. Again, focus the one Pelter to limit the group damage. He casts so fast that even if you're using stuns, displacements, or whatever, you can't interrupt at all. This boss is not really that dangerous on Fortified. If everybody knows like the typical strategy, you try to bait the first crystal wall like really close to the left hand of the boss. So that's where the point is where he spawns this Charskin. And it instantly destroys the wall. You can do more damage to it, it gets stunned. And as a DK again, Death Advance, really nice uses in this dungeon. To keep doing damage to the ad, you can just Death Advance to not get knocked back, and AMZ you can use to completely reduce the damage of combined the knockback, because the knockback actually does nature damage, and of course the big lava slam that also does nature damage. And with the AMZ you can just ignore, like immune basically both of those. On a warrior you can spell reflect the big magma hit, and it does like insane amount of damage. Again, maybe I will do a warrior run as well of this dungeon and showcase the exact timings for this boss. Yeah, nothing much to say about this boss. Hide behind the wall, don't move the boss too much. Again, Death Advance, not only it's better for you to heal up between the tank busters, but also because the boss doesn't move, it's nice to limit the amount of group damage. Yeah, here again, nice bait. The adze almost spawns instantly into the wall. We don't do as much damage to this ad, so it starts running a little bit and doing group damage. I think I was worried about the wall, but we killed it exactly in time to not crush this wall. Yeah, as a DK, this boss is really easy. Just make sure when you don't have Death Advance to press like a short CD so you don't get too much damage from the first landslide, so you can heal up in between and don't get one shot. On Tyrannical, again I skill Rune Tap in this dungeon. For this boss especially, it's really nice because basically it covers both, if you do it right before the landslide, it covers both the landslide and the following hit in this 4 seconds. I think it does. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it should cover both of them with the 20% DR. At this point, after farming 17s of Neltharions Lair for a number of times, I'm still hoping to get the tank trinket, which would have been a really nice conclusion to this 22, but unfortunately still no trinket, but at least a nice little bit of score. And a really nice group. It was really fun to do this key.